So in a world that's, really being shaped by artificial intelligence, what does it actually mean to concentrate? Is it just about focusing on a task, or is there maybe something deeper, more human going on?
That's a great question. And yeah, it really is the heart of what we're exploring today. It takes us way beyond just simple attention. Think of human concentration more like a meta concept. That's how our main source, Understanding Human Concentration in the Age of AI, frames it. It covers this whole range of interconnected abilities.
Okay, of a meta concept. So not just keeping your eye on the ball, so to speak, but something much broader.
Exactly. It pulls in our awareness of our own thoughts, our feelings, our cognitive processes, and really crucially, our ability to connect with and understand other people. Intersubjectivity.
Right.
It's really a world away from just ticking off your to-do list.
Right. So our mission today in this deep dive isn't just productivity hacks. It's more about digging into this bigger picture of human concentration, using this report as our guide. We want to unpack these key parts, this whole intricate web of human faculties, and figure out why it's so important now, with AI becoming such a big part of our lives.
Precisely. And the report does a really good job laying out how these different facets connect and work together. It shows just how much is packed into that simple word, concentration.
Fantastic. Okay, let's dive in then. We're starting by moving past that sort of traditional definition of concentration, just being focused attention.
Yeah.
So what's the report's core take on what human concentration really is?
Yeah, they offer a really useful operational definition. They describe it as our capacity for focused engagement with and understanding of our internal world, so our own thoughts, emotions, and the external world. And there's a real emphasis on grasping the mental states of other people. It's that mix of self-awareness and social understanding that's really key.
Inward and outward facing. I like that. Okay, let's break down these core facets then. The report kicks off with something familiar: attention. But even that sounds like it's got more layers than you'd think.
Oh, it definitely does. Attention isn't just, one single beam. The report points out different types. You've got focused attention deliberately picking one thing. Then there's sustained attention, or vigilance keeping that focus going. Selective attention helps us ignore distractions. Alternating attention is switching between tasks, and divided attention is, juggling multiple things at once.
Wow, okay. It's like our attention has all these different modes we maybe don't even notice we're using. The report mentions visual attention models too. Something about a spotlight and a zoom lens. What's that about?
Yeah, think of it like this. Our visual focus isn't fixed. The spotlight idea is that we can mentally shift our focus around our visual field, like moving a spotlight. And the zoom lens idea suggests we can narrow that beam right down to tiny details or pull back to see the whole picture. It just highlights how dynamic and flexible our visual attention is, something AI is still, working on replicating fully.
Interesting. Okay, next up is metacognition. Sounds a bit technical. What's the gist for us?
Metacognition. Well, fundamentally, it's thinking about thinking. Simple as that, really. It's being aware of and understanding your own thought processes. The key thing here is realizing that reflecting on how you learn can actually make you learn better. It's like having a mental control panel, super important for, say, self-regulated learning, adapting how you approach problems.
So just being aware of how my own mind is working can actually help me concentrate better overall.
Exactly. It gives you that extra layer of control, of adaptability, which leads nicely into the next bit, self-awareness or self-consciousness. This feels really central to being, a concentrating human.
Yeah, it does.
And it is. It's that basic ability to see ourselves as distinct individuals, separate from everything else and everyone else. It includes awareness of our actions, our body, our inner life thoughts, feelings, the whole package.
The report breaks down self-consciousness into different levels, right? From basic awareness up to a narrative self. Can you unpack that a little?
Sure. Think of them as layers building on each other. Basic self-awareness is just that core feeling of being a separate me. Bodily self-awareness is knowing you have a physical body in space. Meta self-awareness is being aware that you're aware, that kind of reflective capacity. And then conceptual self-consciousness is having an idea of who you are, your personality, your history, which ties into that narrative self, the story we tell ourselves about our lives.
That's a really neat way to think about something I usually just, take for granted. Okay, so from understanding ourselves, we move to understanding others. Theory of mind. I feel like I hear that term a lot these days. What's the essence?
Yeah. Theory of mind, or Tom, it's popped up a lot. It's a really critical social skill. It's the ability to attribute mental states, things like beliefs, desires, intentions, emotions, thoughts, both to ourselves and to other people. And crucially, understanding that their inner world, their perspective, might be totally different from our own.
So it's realizing that, the person across from me might see this whole situation completely differently than I do. Why is that so fundamental?
Well, exactly. It lets us predict, interpret, and react to what other people do in a much more sophisticated way. Without it, social life would be incredibly difficult, almost impossible to navigate smoothly, which naturally leads us right into empathy. Feels closely related.
Yeah, empathy. Definitely hear a lot about why that's important. How does the report define it here?
The report sees empathy as our cognitive and emotional responses to what someone else is experiencing. It often makes us want to help them, feel compassion. And it breaks it down into two main types. Cognitive empathy, that's understanding what someone else is feeling and why, and emotional empathy, which is actually sharing their feeling it with them.
Got it. So the difference between thinking, okay, I see why they're upset, and actually feeling a bit sad yourself because they are, and the report calls empathy a cornerstone of morality. That sounds pretty significant.
It really is, because it's so fundamental to our ability to connect with others, to care about their well-being. Now, if we zoom out slightly, all these things, Tom, empathy, self-awareness, they all feed into this broader idea of social cognition. What does that cover?
Social cognition. Sounds like the brain's operating system for dealing with the social world.
That's a good way to put it, yeah. It's how we process information about other people and social situations, how we store it, how we use it. It includes things like theory of mind, obviously, but also social perception, reading body language, facial expressions, and social knowledge, like understanding unwritten social rules and norms. It's a whole toolkit for social life.
Okay. And the last one on the list is intersubjectivity. That sounds like a real meeting of minds.
Yeah, that captures it nicely. Intersubjectivity is that mutual understanding, that connection between people. It's about sharing experiences, knowledge, understanding, even expectations. It's what allows us to build shared meaning, shared culture. And empathy is really key to making that happen, that sharing of inner states.
So putting it all together, attention, metacognition, self-awareness, theory of mind, empathy, social cognition, and intersubjectivity. They're all woven together. It's not just one simple thing AI needs to get right to understand human concentration.
Exactly. That's a key point in the report. AI needs to grapple with this whole intricate web, not just optimize task focus. It's a much more holistic picture of what it actually means to be a concentrating human.
That definitely paints a much deeper picture, but the report also brings up this subjective experience, right? It's not just a checklist of functions.
Absolutely not. There's the whole phenomenological side, what it actually feels like to have these capacities. The report mentions qualia, that first-person subjective quality of experience. Think about seeing the color red. AI can process the wavelength, but it doesn't experience the redness like you do. That subjective what it's like is, frankly, a massive hurdle for AI.
Right, because AI can crunch the data related to, say, sadness, but it doesn't have that internal feeling of being sad.
Precisely. An AI might detect sadness cues in a voice, but it doesn't feel sad. The report also makes a useful distinction between just narrow, focused attention on a task and that broader state of being concentrated on understanding ourselves or others or a complex issue. That broader state really engages all these different facets working together.
And these aren't static abilities either. They're dynamic, working at different timescales, like from a split-second focus shift to our whole sense of self over a lifetime.
Exactly. And there's that really interesting, sometimes tricky balance between knowing we're separate individuals and also connecting deeply with others. That tension runs through theory of mind, empathy, self-awareness, intersubjectivity. The report notes that AI tends to, well, simplify this quite a bit.
It treats things as either totally separate or totally merged, maybe.
Yeah.
Missing that subtle human middle ground.
Kind of, yeah. Which brings us back to that fundamental gap. AI deals with third-person data, whereas our experience is always first-person subjective. And that completely changes what understanding even means for us versus for a machine.
Okay, it's clear this runs deep. It must have roots in our evolution and in how we develop as individuals. Let's dig into those origins a bit. How does evolution explain these complex abilities?
Well, the report brings up the social brain hypothesis. The idea here is that a major driver for primate intelligence, including ours, was actually the growing complexity of our social lives, keeping track of relationships, predicting what others might do, cooperating. These became really vital for survival. So our big brains weren't just for figuring out tools, they were partly for figuring out each other.
Ah, so our social smarts are deeply embedded in why we evolved this way. What about specific things like empathy? How might that have come about?
Things like empathy and imitation probably evolved because they were useful for recognizing social bonds, for understanding others' intentions and motivations. If you could do that, you could form stronger alliances, cooperate better, which ultimately helped with survival and reproduction. Even something complex like theory of mind might have started from more basic abilities to read intentions, all driven by the advantage of being socially connected.
Interesting. And consciousness itself, that sense of self-awareness. How does evolution factor in there? The report mentions different ideas.
Yeah, the exact path is debated,
Yeah.
for sure. But a key idea is that consciousness likely evolved hand in hand with our growing ability for symbolic thought and language, and our need to understand ourselves within these complex social groups. Whether it was gradual or more sudden, self-awareness became this incredibly useful trait for planning, reflecting, coordinating actions.
And it seems we didn't just evolve to understand others, but also to just make sense of the world in general.
Absolutely. We seem to have evolved these fundamental psychological needs for coherence, for understanding, for meaning, for purpose, and these probably built on the cognitive tools we first developed for social understanding. That ability to infer someone else's intention, maybe that broadened into inferring patterns and meaning in the environment too. This drive to understand ourselves, others, the world has been a really powerful evolutionary force.
So it's like understanding ourselves and understanding others evolved together, maybe even using some of the same brain circuitry.
That's definitely a suggestion highlighted in the report. The idea that the neural machinery we use to model other people's minds might overlap or be closely related to the machinery we use for introspection, for understanding our own internal states. This kind of coevolution ultimately boosted our social bonds, cooperation, and, well, our overall success as a species.
Okay, that makes sense from an evolutionary perspective. How does this play out as we grow up? How do these abilities develop in us individually?
Well, the development is pretty fascinating, and it happens in stages. Take theory of mind. Little kids around age 2 start getting that others have inner states that drive what they do. But the big milestone is usually around 4 or 5 years old, when they can pass false belief tests. That shows they understand someone can believe something that isn't actually true. And you see this development lining up with more pro-social behavior, like helping and sharing.
And that ability to understand others keeps getting more sophisticated.
Oh, yeah. As time develops, kids get better at grasping intentions, perspectives, which makes their social interactions much richer. It keeps refining, allowing us to understand sarcasm, figurative language, even what someone thinks someone else is thinking, that second-order theory of mind.
What about empathy? Does it develop in stages too?
Yes, empathy follows its own path. You see really early forms like emotional contagion in babies. One cries, they all cry. Imitation seems to play a role early on, helping infants connect what they see in others with their own feelings. Then, over time, it develops into more complex cognitive empathy, understanding perspectives, and emotional empathy, actually sharing the feelings.
And self-awareness isn't fully formed at birth either, right?
No, definitely not. That emerges too. Toddlers start developing a clearer sense of themselves, their desires, their agency. They start distinguishing me from you. Even early metacognitive skills related to emotions pop up. Young kids can learn simple ways to manage feeling upset, showing a basic kind of thinking about their feelings.
It really sounds like interacting with other people, learning from them, is absolutely key to all this developing properly.
Hugely important. The report emphasizes social learning by watching, imitating, interacting, paying attention to social cues, remembering them, being able to reproduce behaviors, being motivated to fit in. All of that helps us internalize social norms and develop these complex cognitive skills.
So, thinking about AI,
Yeah.
does the report suggest maybe trying to build AI in a similar way, sort of developmentally? What's the thinking there?
It does float that as a potential approach, yeah. Instead of trying to engineer the final complex product straight away, maybe start with simpler sociocognitive building blocks, then let the AI learn and develop through interaction, maybe mimicking human developmental stages. And this is a big but. The report rightly points out that human development happens in these incredibly rich, messy, embodied social and physical environments. Constant feedback, real-world consequences. Current AI just doesn't have that richness. Replicating it is a massive challenge.
Right. It's clear you need to look at this from so many angles. The report then shifts to these interdisciplinary lenses, starting with biology and neuroscience. What does looking at the brain itself tell us?
Neuroscience gives us, well, the physical grounding for all this. For self-awareness, researchers have identified networks involving areas like the medial prefrontal cortex, the posterior parietal cortex, regions involved in processing self-related stuff. The default mode network, often active during mind wandering, is also implicated in self-reflection. And our sense of having a body involves areas like the temporoparietal junction. What's really interesting is how these self-networks seem to overlap with networks involved in understanding others, suggests a deep connection.
So there's actual brain hardware related to this sense of self. What about empathy and theory of mind? Where do they live, so to speak?
Yeah, for empathy, there seems to be a fast, maybe more emotional pathway involving the amygdala, and a slower, more cognitive pathway using cortical areas, especially for understanding someone's perspective. Key regions for theory of mind often include the medial prefrontal cortex again, parts of the temporal lobe like the PSTS and the precuneus. Damage to these areas can really impair someone's ability to mentalize, to understand others. And then there's the mirror neuron system neurons that fire both when we act and when we see someone else act. It's been proposed as a basis for empathy and imitation, though the exact role is still debated pretty heavily.
And attention, that bedrock skill. What's happening neurologically when we're trying to focus?
Different types of attention rely on distinct brain networks. Whether you're selecting one thing, sustaining focus, or dividing it, different circuits are engaged. Interestingly, practices like mindfulness, which are essentially attention training, have been shown to correlate with changes in brain activity, often increased activity in the prefrontal cortex, important for control, and decreased activity in the amygdala, involved in emotional reactivity. Suggests we can actually train these circuits.
It's really fascinating how these abstract mental things have such tangible roots in our biology. The report even mentions genetics playing a role.
It does. Behavioral genetics research shows that many cognitive abilities and personality traits, including things related to social cognition, have a degree of heritability. Certain genetic variations can also influence susceptibility to mental health conditions, which obviously impacts concentration and social connection. There's even some early work suggesting genetics might subtly influence how we process things like others' intentions. It's complex, but biology is definitely part of the story.
Okay, so that's the biological view. What about philosophy? What does that bring to the table when we're trying to understand human concentration?
Philosophy really tackles the fundamental questions about the nature of consciousness, the self, how we even know other minds exist. Defining self-consciousness itself is a big philosophical project, distinguishing basic awareness from that complex narrative self we construct. And of course, there's the famous hard problem of consciousness. Why do physical brain processes give rise to subjective feelings, to qualia? That's still a huge mystery.
And intersubjectivity, that shared understanding. How does philosophy look at that?
Philosophy digs into what shared understanding even means, how it's possible. It sees it as foundational for communication, for culture, for shared meaning itself. Epistemology, the study of knowledge, also asks how we know about other minds. Is it mainly through empathy, maybe some kind of inner imitation? Or is it more like making logical inferences based on behavior? That's an ongoing debate.
The report brings up existentialism, too. How does that fit in?
Existentialism really highlights the individual's role in creating meaning. The idea of existence precedes essence, that we aren't born with a fixed purpose. We define ourselves through our choices and actions. It stresses freedom, responsibility, confronting the sometimes absurd nature of existence. This perspective really underscores the subjective, personal dimension of how we concentrate on understanding ourselves and finding our place in the world.
Okay, so philosophy gives us the big picture concepts. Now, the report also mentions mathematical and logical formalisms. How can maths and logic help understand something as, well, human as empathy or self-awareness?
Well, mathematical psychology tries to build formal models of cognitive processes, perception, decision-making, often assuming the brain is doing some kind of optimal calculation. You also have computational models trying to match specific brain functions, like attention control in the prefrontal cortex, onto algorithms. In social cognition, people build models to simulate theory of mind, or how agents might learn about each other in game-like scenarios. It's about trying to formalize these processes, test theories.
Like trying to create a computational blueprint. What about logic specifically?
Logic helps model reasoning, including the complex if she thinks that he thinks, kind of reasoning we use in social situations. These models often show we're not perfectly logical, we use shortcuts, we have limitations, what's called bounded rationality. The report also mentions integrated information theory, or IIT.
IIT. That's the idea linking consciousness to integrated information, right? What's the key takeaway there?
Exactly. IIT proposes consciousness is basically equivalent to a system's capacity to integrate information, measured by a value called phi. A key prediction is that states with low consciousness, like deep sleep or anesthesia, should have very low phi. It's a controversial theory, but it offers a completely different, mathematically grounded way to think about what consciousness might fundamentally be.
Very abstract. And the report even hints at links between quantum mechanics and consciousness. That sounds pretty out there.
Oh, it's definitely highly speculative, exploring whether quantum effects might somehow play a role in the brain's complexity and our subjective experience. IIT has also spurred some physics discussions about whether integrated information could be a fundamental property of matter itself, concepts like perceptronium. These are really on the fringes of current science, lots of debate.
The report also mentions the binding problem. How do all these different brain activities, seeing, hearing, thinking, feeling, get woven into one single unified experience? So that seems central to both us and maybe AGI.
It's a huge question. Just like building artificial general intelligence requires integrating different AI skills, our brains somehow seamlessly bind all these different streams of information and processing into our coherent sense of self and the world. IIT, by focusing on integration, tries to address this directly, and it highlights that constant tension. We can study the mechanisms, the biology, the computation, but that's different from the lived experience, the philosophy, the what it's like. AI is mostly focused on the mechanisms right now.
And finally, this idea that information theory could be a kind of unifying language across all these fields. But it's contentious. Why?
The core issue is what we mean by information. Standard information theory, Shannon information, is about reducing uncertainty, predictability. IIT's integrated information is about a system's internal causal structure, its intrinsic nature. They're measuring different things. And if human consciousness and understanding rely on this latter kind of integrated information, it raises big questions about whether current AI, which is based on processing Shannon-type information, can ever truly achieve genuine understanding, no matter how powerful it gets.
Wow, okay. So this expanded view of human concentration really ripples outwards, affecting us as individuals and our society. Let's unpack those impacts. How does this broader understanding affect us personally?
On the individual level, it's deeply tied to our well-being. Take self-awareness, understanding your own emotions, your thought patterns. That's fundamental for emotional regulation, making better choices, feeling more confident. It's like having an internal guidance system.
Right. Understanding yourself helps you manage yourself better. What about empathy's role in our individual lives?
Empathy is absolutely vital for building strong relationships, and we know strong social connections are crucial for mental health. Being able to understand and respond to others builds trust, intimacy, helps resolve conflict. It's key to feeling connected and supported.
And metacognition. Thinking about our thinking. How does that play into our personal experience?
Metacognition really boosts our ability to learn effectively and adapt. If you can reflect on what learning strategies work best for you, you become a more effective learner, a better problem solver. That sense of competence and control over your own learning process is really important for feeling good about yourself and your abilities.
And it seems these social cognitive skills even link up with our physical health.
They do, yeah. Social cognitive theory points to things like self-efficacy, your belief in your ability to do something, like stick to an exercise routine. That belief strongly influences whether you actually do it. Plus, there's evidence that physical activity itself can improve aspects of social cognition, maybe by boosting emotional regulation or general cognitive function. It's all interconnected.
So ultimately, these capacities for understanding ourselves and others are maybe essential for meeting our fundamental human needs.
I think that's exactly right. Think about basic psychological needs: autonomy, competence, relatedness or belonging, coherence, meaning. Our ability to understand ourselves, connect meaningfully with others, make sense of our world. These are the tools we use to meet those needs. Good relationships, built on empathy and understanding, are consistently linked to happiness. Deficits in these areas often lead to distress and isolation.
So this richer concentration isn't just a cognitive function, it's foundational for individual thriving. How does it scale up to the societal level?
Well, it scales up significantly. The quality of interpersonal relationships, built on empathy and theory of mind, forms the bedrock of families, communities, and societies. Effective communication, which depends heavily on understanding others' perspectives, is essential for any kind of social cohesion or collective action.
It even shapes how we navigate things like social status and hierarchies.
It seems to, yes. Our social perception skills influence how we understand group dynamics, power structures, our own place within them. Research even shows we tend to visually attend more to people we perceive as high status, a kind of social concentration guiding our interactions.
What about the big structures, cultural norms, societal values? How do they connect?
These aren't just imposed from above. They emerge from collective ways of thinking and understanding within a society. Shared beliefs shape cultural norms, and social cognition is crucial for transmitting that cultural knowledge, for maintaining social cohesion through shared understandings and expectations. Think about different cultural norms around time or personal space. Those are rooted in shared social cognition.
And social cohesion itself, that feeling of usness, of belonging, that also depends on these capacities.
Absolutely. Social cohesion rests on things like trust, belonging, shared values, perceiving institutions as legitimate. All of these rely heavily on mutual understanding, empathy, effective communication. When you see social cohesion fraying due to inequality, polarization, whatever, you often see a breakdown in these fundamental capacities for understanding each other.
Even something like economic behavior isn't purely rational. It's shaped by social understanding.
Definitely. Fields like behavioral economics show this clearly. Our decisions are heavily influenced by social norms, trust, fairness considerations, our assumptions about what others will do. Collective beliefs guide everything from consumer trends to public health compliance. You could almost think of a society's capacity for empathy and shared understanding as a kind of social cognitive capital, vital for good governance, innovation, resilience.
Fascinating. Okay, so this broad human concentration has huge implications. Now let's pivot to AI. Given this complex picture, what can AI actually do right now when it comes to understanding us in this way?
Well, AI is making progress in areas that touch on human concentration, but, and this is crucial, the understanding is often quite superficial. Take emotion AI, or affective computing. It tries to recognize emotions from faces, voices, text. It can get pretty accurate in controlled settings, identifying basic emotions like happy or sad. But in the real world, with mixed emotions, cultural differences, subtle expressions, performance drops off significantly. And the key thing is, it's pattern matching. It detects statistical regularities associated with an emotion. It doesn't feel the emotion or understand its context in a human way.
Right. It sees a smile pattern but doesn't grasp the joy or maybe the politeness or even nervousness behind it. What about understanding our intentions?
That's another big area, intent recognition. Vital if humans and AI are going to collaborate smoothly. AI systems analyze behavior, language, context to try and infer our goals. There's progress, like using gaze tracking or gesture interpretation. But human intent is often subtle, ambiguous, deeply tied to context and shared knowledge that AI just doesn't have yet. Getting to human-level nuance is still really hard.
In simulating social interactions, I've heard about AI models for that.
Yeah, researchers use AI to model aspects of social dynamics, even trying to build agents with a rudimentary theory of mind in simplified game environments. But again, the report stresses that current AI is good at finding correlations in social data, spotting patterns. It lacks genuine causal understanding, the why behind the behavior, the subjective motivations. Simulating actual consciousness or self-awareness, that's way, way off.
For progress in recognizing some outward signs, but a long way from grasping the inner world driving human concentration. What are the main technical roadblocks AI is hitting?
There are quite a few big ones. Data is always a challenge. Needing huge amounts of diverse, high-quality, well-labeled data is tough, expensive, and raises ethical questions. Dataset bias is a massive problem. If the data isn't representative, the AI's assessments will be inaccurate or unfair for certain groups. Then there's just the sheer difficulty of interpreting nuance, context, ambiguity, sarcasm, mixed signals, cultural stuff. And that fundamental subjectivity barrier AI can't access our first-person experience, the qualia. Plus practical things like needing immense computing power, the challenges of integrating different data types effectively, and ensuring the AI actually works reliably out in the messy real world.
Okay, lots of hurdles. But the report must suggest some ways forward. How might AI get better at this?
Yeah, it points to several avenues. Better data is foundational. Larger, more diverse, more context-rich, representative data sets with clear documentation. Algorithmic improvements are key better ways to integrate multimodal data, maybe drawing insights from neuroscience, building models that can handle uncertainty better. Explainable AI, XAI, is also important. Making AI's reasoning more transparent helps build trust and spot errors. Incorporating more contextual knowledge, cultural norms, histories, relationships could make a big difference. And focusing on causal understanding, not just correlation, is a crucial long-term goal. moving beyond pattern matching to something closer to reasoning.
So even though AI doesn't truly understand us yet, it's being used in ways that interact with our minds and emotions. Mental well-being applications were mentioned.
Right. AI chatbots and virtual therapists are being developed to offer accessible support, maybe guiding users through basic CBT exercises or tracking moods. There's also research into using AI to analyze patterns in communication or behavior to help detect early signs of mental health issues. And it can help clinicians by automating some admin tasks, freeing them up for patients.
That sounds potentially very useful, increasing access. What about other areas, like personalized support?
In education, the idea is AI could potentially adapt learning materials based on sensing a student's engagement or emotional state. Tailored recommendations are common across many platforms now, and there's specific tools being developed to help people with particular needs, like those on the autism spectrum, perhaps helping them interpret social cues. More broadly, AI analysis of large data sets could help optimize resource allocation in healthcare or other sectors, but ideally with a strong human-centered focus.
We keep coming back to this shallow understanding problem. AI spots patterns, but misses the why.
Exactly, and that carries risks. We might over-attribute understanding to AI, anthropomorphize it. And while data enables AI, biased or decontextualized data is a huge bottleneck. Quality and representativeness matter more than sheer quantity. There's also this constant utility-authenticity trade-off. A chatbot might be helpful, but it lacks real empathy. We need to be careful not to devalue genuine human connection or create unhealthy dependencies.
Which leads us squarely into the ethics. As AI engages more with these core human traits, we really need to be careful. What are the big ethical red flags the report raises?
Bias and fairness are huge. AI inheriting and amplifying societal biases when assessing emotions or intentions. That has serious consequences in areas like hiring, healthcare, even law enforcement. Privacy, obviously, is critical when you're dealing with sensitive, emotional, or mental data. Who owns it? How is consent managed? Security, surveillance risks. Then there's manipulation. Could emotionally savvy AI nudge users in certain directions, exploit vulnerabilities, undermine critical thinking? Generative AI potentially makes this easier. Transparency is key. If these systems are black boxes, it erodes trust and makes it hard to spot errors or biases. Accountability is tricky too. Who's responsible if an AI causes harm? And the potential for deception, AI mimicking empathy, could mislead people, create false emotional bonds, potentially leading to exploitation or devaluing real human relationships.
It really sounds like ethics needs to be baked in from the very beginning, not bolted on afterwards.
Absolutely. That's the whole idea behind human-centered artificial intelligence, or HDAI, prioritizing human values, safety, well-being, ensuring human oversight and control.
And society itself will have to adapt as these technologies become more common. What kind of societal shifts might we see?
We could see changes in how we communicate, perhaps a shift if AI mediation becomes common. Building trust in AI will be a delicate process. Errors or ethical breaches can easily erode it. Over-reliance is a risk, too, potentially leading to atrophy of our own skills. The impact on jobs and workplace dynamics is obviously a massive discussion. Displacement, surveillance, algorithmic management, fairness concerns. We're already seeing regulatory responses like the EU AI Act trying to get ahead of some of this. The effect on social cohesion is a double-edged sword. Misinformation and deepfakes could worsen divisions, but ethically designed AI could potentially foster empathy or dialogue. It's really an ongoing societal learning curve.
And it's crucial to think about who benefits and who might be particularly vulnerable here.
Definitely. Potential beneficiaries. Maybe people seeking more accessible mental health support, patients with certain cognitive disorders, students getting personalized learning, maybe organizations gaining efficiency. But vulnerable groups include kids and teens, manipulation risk, attachment issues, older adults, scams, misinterpretations, people with existing mental health issues, over-reliance, bias, minority groups. Algorithmic bias is a huge concern. And people in power imbalances, like employees subject to workplace AI. That's why safeguards, strong regulations, bias mitigation, transparency, human oversight, public education are absolutely essential.
It feels like the tech is moving faster than our ability to create the ethical guardrails, the report's idea of an ethical debt.
Yeah, that captures it well. We're playing catch up. We need more proactive ethical design, anticipating issues rather than just reacting. And we have to keep wrestling with that paradox of AI-driven empathy. It aims to support empathy, but risks being superficial, manipulative, or eroding the real thing. It's this ongoing coevolution. Society shapes AI development, and AI, in turn, reshapes society. Public discussion, AI literacy, adaptive rules are all going to be vital.
This whole exploration has really brought us to some fundamental questions about being human. The report's final part talks about these echoes of existence. Things like meaning, intuition, even the darker sides of human nature.
Right. Our capacity for this rich, multifaceted concentration is intrinsically linked to how we find meaning in life. Whether you look at sociological ideas of shared meaning or existentialist views of creating meaning through choice. Our ability to self-reflect, to understand others, to make sense of our experiences, that's the toolkit we use. AI might be a tool in that process, but it can't be the source of meaning itself.
The report also doesn't shy away from difficult topics like cruelty, or just the basic fact that we all see the world differently.
Yeah, understanding things like aggression involves complex psychology. AI might spot patterns related to risk factors, but applying it there needs extreme ethical care. And acknowledging subjective perception that our biases, culture, experiences shape how we see things is crucial. AI systems also have their own form of perception shaped by their data and algorithms. Designing AI that respects and accounts for human diversity of perception is really important. Then there's intuition, that gut feeling, immediate understanding without conscious steps. Current AI is all about explicit processing. It doesn't really have anything analogous to that holistic, sometimes subconscious human insight.
So given how vital all these aspects of human concentration are, how can we actually cultivate them? Especially for kids growing up in this AI-infused world.
The report points to practical pedagogical approaches. Teaching self-awareness through things like journaling, mindfulness exercises, discussing values, fostering empathy and theory of mind with role-playing, storytelling, discussing characters' perspectives. Standard techniques for improving attention still apply, breaking down tasks, managing distractions, exercise, sleep, and importantly, structured social and emotional learning, SEL programs like the KSEL framework, explicitly teach competencies like self-management, social awareness, relationship skills in age-appropriate ways.
And what about on a societal level? How can we collectively get better at this?
Well, things like cognitive bias mitigation training can help individuals and organizations make better decisions. Promoting emotional intelligence through education and workplace initiatives is key. Actively working to enhance social cohesion by tackling inequalities and fostering dialogue makes a difference. Encouraging widespread adoption of mindfulness and self-awareness practices has benefits. And, circling back, ensuring the ethical development and deployment of AI itself, human-centered design, fairness, transparency is crucial for supporting, not undermining, these human capacities. It's all interconnected.
So it's incredibly clear that human concentration is so much more than just focus. It's this deep, rich tapestry of self-awareness, empathy, social understanding, fundamentally human qualities.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And as we've discussed, AI, for all its power, really struggles to grasp that richness, especially the subjective, lived experience that's at the heart of it all.
Which means as AI continues to develop and interact more with these core human abilities, we absolutely have to move forward carefully, thoughtfully, with strong ethical guidelines leading the way.
Couldn't agree more. We need constant vigilance about both the potential benefits and the very real limitations and risks.
So for you listening, as AI becomes even more woven into your life, into the world around you, maybe take a moment to think about your own concentration in this broader sense. Your self-awareness, your empathy, how you connect with and understand others. How might that evolve? What parts of human understanding, human connection will always remain uniquely essential in this future we're building alongside artificial intelligence?
Right.
Definitely something to keep reflecting on.
This is DigitView.